Okay, ready?
I'm with Gary Johnston again, and this time we're going to talk about neurocom, which is a whole system and a model that you've created to understand what's going on in the psyche.
Sort of, yes.
Which you use with the psychonutrition. So could you explain it for us?
Neurocom is a model of the mind and a system for changing emotional memory, which I've developed over quite some period. I've been involved in psychotherapy now for 35 years. I specialise in anxiety disorders and trauma, as you know. And I found that most of the traditional models were not working, and even some of the more alternative models weren't working. So what I looked at was actually how the mind functions and the communication system between conscious and unconscious mind. And I realised there were certain things that were going on in highly stressed people that couldn't be explained by the traditional models. So over time I worked out a methodology of actually accessing directly the unconscious mind without changing any awareness, no hypnosis. The method is used basically in a conversation like I'm having with you, so be careful. But what I found was that when you explain to a client who is highly stressed over a long period of time exactly what's happening, you can actually change emotional memory very, very quickly. Your unconscious mind actually learns instantly. It doesn't take months or years. An example, how long did it take you to learn not to put your hand on a hot stove?
Probably seconds, yeah.
That quick.
It
is, a split second. That's how long it takes your unconscious mind to learn, providing it understands that it's no longer protecting you by doing what it was doing.
Okay, because this is fascinating, because when I was with you earlier today, looking at the training that you were doing, you talked about there being emotional and everything else, all the memories aren't encoded in the emotional place.
No, emotion is not actually built into the memory.
Okay. So
it
emotion
is
is
encoded
separate from the memory.
Emotion is a physical response to an unconscious projection. So what happens is you become aware of something in consciousness, which triggers the emotional memory that is unconscious. That will bring up a reaction, which will create a physical reaction. So you become aware of the emotion by the changes in your body. So changes in tightness in muscles or circulation, temperature changes, all those sort of things. That's how we determine what an emotion is. And it's different for everybody. You know, not everybody that has an emotion experiences it in the same way.
So in a way we arrest the emotion by all of the memories and the ideas that we have about that emotion. We stop it passing through. Would you say that's how it works? Or?
No. You will always, if you trigger a memory group that has an emotion embedded in it,
yes,
it will always trigger that physical emotion,
okay,
whatever you do, until you give your unconscious mind an instruction that that emotion is no longer protecting you the way it thinks it is. Once it understands that, it drops the behaviour instantly. It actually reprograms the memory, and it does it automatically. It'll do it itself, and you don't have to give it direction.
Can you give us an example in your life where suddenly something's been dropped? Do you know what I mean? Is that where you've made that connection and realised that the emotional memory isn't actually necessarily
in my life?
Look,
I went through an experience many years ago that, despite treating other people for panic attacks, I actually ended up with a physical illness when I was overseas, and that triggered a series of panic attacks when I get back, which I didn't realise were panic attacks until I ended up in a situation where I had conscious recognition of what the trigger was, and then I knew what it was. Now, panic attacks, if you've ever had one, are pretty nasty. They are an aggressive anxiety disorder, which can continue on forever. And I'd had that for about 3 months when I had this experience where I realised exactly what it was. I turned it off simply by changing the model that my mind was using to create the anxiety. So literally I flipped a switch, turned it off, never had a panic attack after.
Because you realised what was going on.
Realised what was going on, and then I gave my unconscious an instruction, that's no good anymore, we're doing it a different way.
Wow.
And it just accepts the direction.
Do you need high levels of self-awareness to do that? Do you have to be self-aware?
To do it yourself, yes. You've got to have a level of emotional intelligence to be able to do it. But when you're doing it with somebody else, you can turn emotions on or off very, very quickly. You can modify memory. You can actually adjust memory. in the thing that you'd never do, you can actually destroy memory, so it's not there anymore. But what you do is adjust what is in memory. And you're doing that all the time. You know, what is in your emotional memory is not accurate, not by a long shot. So you can tweak it up and down, you can change colours, you can adjust the people in it, you can do all sorts of stuff. And when you do that, you actually change the emotional attachment that's there. So you can delete the emotion very quickly. And you delete the emotion out of an entire lifetime within minutes. The whole lot just changes.
It's phenomenally powerful.
It is.
Yeah, I'd love to see it in action. I've not seen it in action, so it seems amazing.
Well, you have to come and do the course, I'll show it to you. Either
Thanks
that or
for
I'll... Do you have any problems?
I'm sure I can manufacture a few.
We'll rip it out in a couple of
That
months.
sounds dodgy. Okay.
No, but as an example, for instance, traditional model, working with PTSD, I've specialised that for a long time. Traditional models have no way of dealing with chronic, long-term and complex PTSD. Some of the most disturbing parts of post-traumatic stress disorder are the flashbacks, the intrusive memories. I've dealt with people with PTSD that have had it for 20, 30, 40 years. Consistent flashbacks on a daily basis. I can rip that out in 2 hours flat. Gone, and they never have it again. And those people have usually gone through all the traditional models and getting worse.
Wow. Well, it sounds really powerful stuff.
It is.
And you're on a world tour again, aren't you? Doing this whole thing.
Yes, we'll be back in France next year by the look of it. And we're doing the next training, I think we're doing in Melbourne in Australia in November. I basically want to train some really good therapists so I can retire. Getting too old for this stuff.
And charge them royalties.
Yeah, exactly, that's right. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, Gary. It's been a pleasure. And
You're welcome.
Your work's on the Jones site again, isn't it? The Golden
Again, you
Institute.
can get it through there or through neurocom.org.
Neurocom.org.